So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and welcome to my iPhone 14 Pro Max 6 months later. Now, this phone launched at around $11.99 and goes up from there depending on the storage that you do want. And the first thing I want to talk about was, do I think the price was worth it? And I gotta say, yeah, probably, just because of the upgraded camera system. The dynamic island was also a neat touch. And also you got more brightness on this phone, which was kind of key. But you kind of expect this at this price point, you know, high-end specs and stuff like that. Is it a major upgrade from the 13 Pro Max? Absolutely not. But I still think that this phone offers enough to justify its price tag. So that's the first thing I wanted to get out of the way. 6 months later, when it comes to the build quality and the design, I got to tell you that it still feels like $1,000,000 in your hand. Stainless steel edges really take this phone to the next level, and it really feels posh, premium. And 6 months later, I still pick up this phone and it still feels like it's top of the line in the industry. And while there is competitors out there who are doing designs that are arguably better looking, potentially almost as good premium feel, Apple definitely is still putting out a very premium feeling device. However, it is starting to get a little bit dated in terms of looking like the year before, and the year before that too, in the iPhone 13 Pro Max and the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So I still think it's time for them to do something a little bit different. But at the same time, has it felt premium over the 6 months? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's got a weight to it that just feels polished. It just feels like a nice, like you paid some money for this. It's got these edges that feel like just a little bit higher quality metal than you're used to. And then the front, pretty much dominating the whole front with display. And then the attention to details, like just how this antenna line is like matched up perfectly on that side with that one. The precisionally drilled holes at the bottom here, the torque screws being in exactly the same location on both sides. And then you'll see over here, we do have just really clean, look at this right here, how it just kind of like matches this part. And then the camera housings do have like this metal shiny piece around them. And if you do look right here, you'll see that the space black colorway definitely shows like a graphite look with a darker black here on the edges. So it's definitely my favorite color from the iPhone 14 Pro series in general. So overall, 6 months later, I'm still happy with the build and the feel, but it's not anything that is like overly shockingly new. But if you've never had a Pro Max device, it's going to feel amazing to you. But if you've had anything like the 12 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max, you'll probably be fine with waiting this one out. But still, you know, I'm talking about the 14 Pro Max today, and it's been phenomenal. Let's go ahead now and talk about display quality. How has this aged? Well, it hasn't really aged. It's still probably in the top 3 best displays on the market today. I do think that the Galaxy S23 Ultra has beaten this display in terms of vibrancy and stuff like that. This one still gets brighter in direct sunlight. It's not that useful though, because it will dim after it gets a little bit too hot, but still, it definitely gets brighter. I also do like that the dynamic island sets itself apart from other phones. So when you see this display panel, you know that this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max. You know it's an iPhone 14 Pro. You know this is not an Android phone here when you see somebody with this phone. I also think that the combination of iOS, Apple running it from top to bottom with their processor, and the 120 Hz ProMotion make the iPhone 14 Pro Max probably the smoothest feeling phone on the market today. So definitely smooth. They got this nailed down. This is like the smoothest thing out there when it comes to smartphones. So if you really like that, you're going to absolutely love this. And it's not about just me scrolling through and showing you. It's the smaller things. Like when you're actually just scrolling slowly, you won't see any refresh lag, nothing like that. And when you click things, it always just has a nice, buttery, smooth animation. Look, if I go slower, you'll just see everything. When you click things like that, there's no refresh delay, nothing like that. And then when you press things, they're also incredibly smooth. The response rate of your finger to touch the screen has also been fantastic. Now, one area that I have to knock it though is that when it comes to let's go to the channel. When it comes to the dynamic island, if you do pinch in, It is, in media, it's not my favorite. I'd rather grab my iPad, watch a regular TV or something like that if I'm watching content, or keep it like this because I find a dynamic island it's still distracting. 6 months later, I still see it. I'm not going to be oblivious to the fact that there's a big pill over there. So while dynamic island does have its uses and features, display experience wise, it has interrupted it a little bit. So a full screen iPhone would still be the dream for me for sure. But I got really nothing else to say about the display besides the fact that it comes with your typical dark mode, night shift, true tone. There's still no way to really, tweak the contrast resolutions, stuff like that. The way it is how it is. It's simple. You're not really going to be tweaking RGB values, nothing like that. So yeah, that's about it. Portrait mode, it's a pretty large panel, but there's not much more else to say about display. It's definitely top of the line. Is the S23 Ultra better display? Arguably, yes. And is there phones out there with competing displays? Yeah. But the iPhone 14 Pro Max still putting out one of the best out there in color accuracy, brightness, smooth factor. It's at the top of the game. Now, the next one is the software experience. Now, I gotta tell you, this is an area where the iPhone is getting a little bit stale, in my opinion. Yes, we get 16.3.1, we get 0.1 updates, we get dot this, a little icon tweak here and there, a little things like that here and there. You'll have a little upgrade inside of an application that Apple launches, but having like a little feature different in Apple Music and a couple of updates and maps and some app updates. And yeah, but the widgets, the app library, the home screen, it's still all the same. It's been the same for a few years now, and it's just kind of stale. It's just not different, and that works Apple's advantage in that people don't want different. They don't got time. They just want to use something they're used to and get on with their life. And that's a really strong thing about it. The ecosystem is sticky. Once you start using it, it really works well for a lot of people, and they don't really want to go ahead and try anything out that different. They just want to stick with what works and what they know. And for that reason, that is a good reason to keep using it. But I will say, as a tech enthusiast, as somebody who loves technology, I just want to see different icon look, just maybe something a little bit different, maybe modernize it a little bit, because it's getting to that point. Once again, I think we should see a bigger update to iOS, maybe some multitasking, big old screen, and we can't even do a split screen. That's pretty embarrassing, I would say, for this phone, especially considering that there's so much screen space to do it. You don't have to overcomplicate it, Apple, but put some kind of split screen. It would be amazing. Performance 6 months later, we're talking about the A16 Bionic, and honestly, I haven't been blown away with this A16 Bionic. It's just kind of like the A15 Bionic, in everyday use, it doesn't really overly impress me. I feel like the iPhone 14 is just about as fast feeling as this. 6 gigabytes of RAM on here, no 8 gigs. It should have 8 gigs, I feel like, for this price point. But the iPhone 14 Pro Max with its A16 is still top of the line, fastest phone out there. We do have Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 really taking a competition to this chipset. But A17, I think, will be a bigger leap for Apple. But honestly, at this point, phones are so fast that there's just really nothing to talk about here with speed anymore. They just work. It's more about battery life, performance. What is the actual design you're getting? What are you getting for the money? How does this phone actually feel to own, and things like that? At this point, they're so fast. They're probably faster than your brain could compute, honestly. It's like you can do things faster than you could tap things. So at this point, I really don't have much to say about the A16 other than that it's been pretty much flawless performing, but it doesn't overly impress me. Like, the phone doesn't feel faster than if it had an A15, for example. The iPhone 14 Plus feels like the same phone, just without 120 hertz. Now, in the long term, having the A16 might help you get a little bit more software updates, but as of now, I'm not really seeing it change the game too much. 6 months later, when it comes to the camera experience here with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it's been amazing. One thing I will say though is that it does have some bokeh effects, so it's a little bit more pro-like camera than the 13 series. So I think the 13 had a better consumer grade camera, because this one can get a little blurry if you don't, put it far enough back, because it does have 48 megapixels. It will create some bokeh. Now, it does have a good amount of zoom, but the zoom is really lacking by comparison to the competition. It tops out at 3x optical. That is It feels pretty embarrassing at this point for Apple to keep shipping these phones without 10 to 15x zoom optically. Like, come on, man. And give us something longer on a digital as well, like 30x minimum. Like, let's start competing with the Google Pixel and the Samsung here, because honestly, it feels like a step back. The macro mode is one of the best in the game though. So if you're looking for taking really close-up shots, you're definitely gonna love this phone. It's my favorite from when it comes to macro shots. It has a really high quality, crisp macro result. So you're gonna love that. Now in video, you also get 4K 60, no 8K, nothing like that. But the thing is that the 4K 60 is so good on here. And are you really gonna be using 8K video? So I'm not really gonna knock it for not having 8K. 8K is kind of it's a moot point at this point. The action mode also is one of the smoothest out there. I found it to be even smoother than Samsung's Super Steady. So definitely, I really like the action mode. If you're in the GoPro like video, you're gonna love that. It stays super smooth. Cinematic is for the pros. I never really use that stuff, but honestly, you have raw modes, portrait modes, and the raw photography on here is pretty good. So when you do want to do some post-processing, post-editing and stuff like that, you'll do a good job there. Another thing I like about this phone comparatively to something like a Samsung phone is that they don't really over sharpen things. I do find the processing of their photos can look a little weird. They're not super raw. So definitely go into raw mode if you want to have a more blank photo and you want to do your own editing. But honestly, I think most people are going to love this camera. It takes phenomenal results. Front-facing camera also very good. And front-facing video also very good as well. Matches up very well with the rear. So yeah, 6 months later with the camera, I don't have much else to say but that it's been phenomenal. It's really good. I think they're being passed up in some areas by Samsung, but I think we're going to see some big updates to the iPhone 15 series or 15 Ultra, whatever they plan to launch later this year, for sure. Now, one area that has never gotten better for me on this phone, and it still bothers me to this day, is the battery life. The battery life has never super, impressed me here. It's never beat the iPhone 13 Pro Max for me. And even over this time I've been having it, I still have 100% clean energy charging on. I have not been able to replicate the incredible performance I was getting from the 13 Pro Max. Does this phone still make it a whole day? Easily. But it doesn't make it the full 2 days like I was getting on the 13 Pro Max. It's more like 1.5. So 13 Pro Max had a better battery life than this, and I think it's because of the brighter 120 hertz panel on here. But honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed to report that this did not beat last year's 13 Pro Max. And even with the updates, it still doesn't beat last year's 13 Pro Max. So for sure, I think Apple can go back to the drawing boards and get the battery back up on the next model. But it still makes it through a full day, so it's not like it's a bad phone. It's not like it doesn't make it a day. It's just it doesn't overly impress like the last one did. Now, let's talk about the audio quality on here. You'll see right here, a little bit faster on the right, still a little bit faster on the right, still faster on the right. It's not the loudest speaker on the market. There are phones that are louder, but it's got a very deep sound, rich sound. And we'll go over here to Best Buy. And you'll find Best Buy to be an easy win on the right. And it'll definitely fill up the room. So if you're looking for a nice audio performing phone, this one is going to be fantastic for you here. Now, when it comes to phone calls and connectivity, I have to say I've been very happy with the fact that Apple has really gone to town on fixing this. They have really good reception strength everywhere now. 5G performance is strong pretty much everywhere. This is no longer, behind when it comes to this area. It has very good call quality and very good reception strength pretty much everywhere I went. So they really improved this. 14 and 14 Pro Maxes are just incredible here. So thumbs up on that one. I've been happy. At the end of the day, we covered pretty much everything I want to talk about here 6 months later with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Am I a happy buyer of this phone? And the answer is yes. Am I overly impressed with this phone? The answer is no. It feels like the pinnacle of iPhone, but they're not really pushing it too far, trying to really reinvent the iPhone. And it's not that they have to reinvent it. And while the dynamic island does make this feel different and the improved cameras were good, it still feels like we need some multitasking. We need some more zoom on this phone. And we just need something a little bit different looking in the software, because even with these small upgrades, it still feels kind of like the same phone. That's my only downside to this phone. Other than that, it's a definite go. And if you're not willing to wait 6 more months for a new iPhone, I still recommend the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Let me know your thoughts on the 14 Pro Max. Do you plan on picking one up? Do you have one? And if you've had one already a while, go ahead and share your 6 months or your 3 months thoughts down below in the comments. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.